But today, just getting the data, we have seen, we go to a company and you are even trying to do like an ROI analysis. We know everything about our robots, but then some of the process guys will come. Okay, let us put our data in order first, so that we can compare with what we do today to what will be with the robots. And I'm like, don't you know what you do today? Sort of, kind of, but we have to get the data. It takes days and weeks for them to get a quantified view of what they do. Okay, there's an intuitive view, obviously, but the quantified view takes time. So we can actually flip that script. We can put the orchestration layer. We can initially just make sure that we are tracking the manual processes itself, and even there create value with the orchestration. But the real fun obviously starts once the robots come in. But we can flip this script. It's very exciting.
Hi, wherever you're joining me, I hope you're doing well. Welcome to India Tech Report, a platform dedicated to chronicling and supporting the growth of India's deep tech and climate tech ecosystems. One conversation at a time. I'm Hariharakli, and in this episode, I catch up with Saurabh Chandra, founder and CEO at Ati Motors, to discuss his views on how factory automation is evolving in the era of physical AI. Ati Motors makes autonomous mobile robots for materials movement in factories, and its customers include several Fortune 500 companies. The idea of a lights out factory or a dark factory is decades old. Engineers dreamed of fully automated installations where robots and machines took over without human intervention and made useful things for us. Cars, for example. But a combination of both technical challenges and real world non engineering problems ensured that such factories remained more science fiction and less reality. Until recently. Today, many experts in the industry and advanced manufacturing believe that we are approaching a tipping point with respect to automation and robotics technologies. In this conversation, Saurav spoke about how Ati is preparing for the future factory, where robots will no longer stay in the safety zones of yellow cages, but mix with humans and other robots. He outlined the idea of an AI-led materials movement orchestration platform that Ati has deployed already with some early customers. The platform considers how physical AI or robots, software AI agents, and humans will all interact, making factories of the future more efficient and sustainable. And Saurabh gives us a sense of how the journey to the dark factory will likely involve 3 phases and how he thinks Ati can catalyze and facilitate that transformation. Let's go. Saurabh, thank you for making time for this, and fantastic to have you on India Tech Report. And we also have some very interesting things happening both at Ati and in the broader tech market. And we should tell our audience that I think probably almost exactly 3 months since you've moved to the US. And I thought that's one interesting point to take off on this conversation, because you can probably give us a sense of what is happening at Ati in terms of where you all are at with your new products, technologies, and business operations, and what you see in some of your biggest markets. And which kind of gives us also a sense of the timing of your move to the US and all of that. And let's go from there.
Of course. So I would say, from a market perspective, definitely, that was one thing which triggered, because we were seeing more and more traction in the US market, and then being closer to where your business is kind of makes sense. But I would say the more fundamental and exciting stuff happened on not the consuming side but the producing side. Okay. I think the way the AI agents have really become so much more capable in the last couple of months. Frankly, I couldn't have timed my move better to be at the heart of where the changes are happening. And what a time to be alive, to be honest, right? It's mind-boggling what is happening right now. And while I think it's a time of great disruption and opportunity, okay, and flux. So a lot of people are quite confused by the way, right? Everybody's trying to figure their place in life, by the way, right? Such existential questions are coming for a lot of people, and definitely here I would say at our customer side that is little less, because customers are mostly midwest, so they probably get this very filtered out through news, etc., and they're not following tech news as much. Probably the Iran war affects them much more than what's happening here. But I would say at the board level I see much more changes. The boards are definitely much more clued in. We see more senior management asking how AI and robotics is going to disrupt their business. So there is a newfound urgency we see from a customer side to really figure out and get ahead of things, right? And I think there will be people either will get ahead of stuff or get completely left behind. I think a lot of people in especially large companies who for whom status quo was their friend has that status quo as a friend situation has is absolutely in the past. Okay. And so for us, I think first thing is being able to put us out in front of the right leaders to make sure that we cater to the market. I think that's clearly one part of the equation. But the second part is also, even as a startup, we need to completely rethink and realign ourselves as to how we make our robots. And that is happening constantly. I think the way these things have changed, one shouldn't take anything for granted. All the old ways of doing things are up in the air right now. Okay. And then uh, uh, I think largely the physical stuff one has made is very valuable, because that is still not something agents can do well, and it takes the time it takes. So I think having great hardware, price to performance ratio, those things don't change. Understanding of customer businesses doesn't change. Closing large enterprise deals is not changing. Okay, those things don't change. But I think wherever there is software, it changes drastically in ways that people have not realized as yet. Yeah.
Okay. So, a lot of points there to chew on, and let's sort of dive into the context a bit more. And as we were discussing this conversation, you mentioned how there's a sort of trifecta of factors today that's making things really interesting, and you kind of alluded to that, so much in flux. So, if we have SKU proliferation, we have labor shortages in many of the advanced economies. And then there is, as you mentioned, this sort of an inflection point of the so called physical AI or embodied AI and whatnot,
Correct.
becoming more and more integrated into hardware. So, walk us through what this means. What's the significance? How is it affecting large industries?
Right. So specifically for manufacturing, I think, see, a lot of times people look at mobile robots specifically, right? I mean, that's our space, which I can speak a little more confidently about. People come to this mobile robotics space and very quickly conflate and mix warehousing and manufacturing. And we have now repeatedly seen, at least in Ati, I mean, we have more than 50 large enterprise customers in manufacturing, 15 of them Fortune 500. And and the muscle it takes to put robots in those kind of places is very different from warehousing. I mean, warehousing is like Manhattan grids. The workflows are simpler, sometimes more number of robots, so you actually get faster traction, right? But the environments are very similar to each other, whereas warehouse manufacturing is very diverse. It's still structured but highly diverse. Okay. And you have all kinds of things. You have dirty environments, flooring is not great, you may have oil patches, sometimes you have to go outdoors because your two buildings are separated by a road, right? So already manufacturing was different physically also. But there are also very interesting ingredients in manufacturing which are different. For example, manufacturing is not moving stuff, it is making stuff. Okay. So we move stuff in the service of making it, and that makes a lot of difference. When you move stuff in the service of making it, first thing which is very interesting is what comes in is that you have to handle work in progress inventory. Okay. And and whereas in a warehouse the stuff that you move doesn't change, it doesn't get transformed. But in a factory, what you are moving gets transformed, and your product gets transformed. And that's the job of factory, right? Factory is in the business of transforming raw material into finished goods. Okay. Whereas the warehouse is just in the business of moving it. Now, when you're moving finished goods, one clear thing which has happened, and and I noticed this, by the way, I mean, because as you know, my background was also working in tech marketing in my previous startup as part of Razorfish, right? And with the big data revolution itself, what we could see is marketers could segment things more and more with data. Okay. I mean, with human cognition, we were basically segment audience into maybe 10, 20 categories. Sometimes actually less, right? Because you can't handle, right? How do you write? Who will write the copy for like 20 categories, right? Who will write the market spec? Who will write, right? Like, but with big data, people started doing that. With AI, that's even more. I mean, marketers can now segment in hundreds. Okay, and everything will get generated by agents, etc. So you suddenly are able to personalize. This is hyper personalization, which is the era we are going towards. It started with big data already, so factories are already seeing it now. Where so anything that you buy used to be 10, 15 SKUs like 15 years ago is already 50 to 100 SKUs, and it will become hundreds of SKUs going forward. Okay, it's clearly a thing which is already complex, is getting worse, and this is the problem which you find mostly in factories. So factories are having to invest a lot of money in creating lines which can handle more and more number of SKUs. But guess what, you invest a lot of money in those lines, and then your weakest cog in the wheel is how do you feed those lines optimally so that you can now use that line the way it is supposed to be used. The lines are getting more and more sophisticated and expensive, right? But you need to feed it, and since especially this part is very, very weak, surprisingly, and when you look deeper, not so surprisingly, in lean manufacturing typically, and the old world, right, the movements wouldn't change. They were frankly frozen in time. So why do you need to make them very intelligent, right? I mean, you change your SKU mix or your product mix once a quarter or something like that, or once in 6 months. It's already getting into weeks, and now suddenly you realize that you need to I mean, it's all being done manually, and you get into suboptimal stuff. When you are making these SKU mixes, factories have a lot of these staging areas, for example, right? Just to give you one more example, there a lot of these staging areas there are there in factories. Now when your product mix changes, the staging areas change in real time. Now you could get away by making them manually and somebody keeping in their minds where is what, right? And ERPs only track stuff in finished states. Okay, so they are in raw material or finished goods. They cannot track items whose value is not certain. Okay, so these items, even today, largest factories, Fortune 500 factories in the world, you have whiteboards where status of local inventory is kept. Okay, and somebody like captures it on a weekly basis. You will see what's happening, or end of shift you'll collect that data. You can't do anything real time. Okay, absolutely. So this is a big issue which always was there. It was not a problem, and suddenly with this change which is happening, which is a part of this AI revolution only, in my opinion, but has suddenly become important and urgent for factories to handle. The second part, obviously, as we have discussed, and that people know ad nauseum, so I'll not talk much about it, which is just the labor shortages. I mean, Western world, they just know. I mean, Amazon, to take an example, right? I mean, although we're mostly in factories, but there are towns where Amazon has run through all the employable people like twice. Okay, so, they don't have just folks available from in the pool in from which they need to hire. And people think, okay, Amazon has like 1 million robots, okay, already, and they're far like 10x more than their nearest competitor, even in China, right? And 1 million, nobody has 1 million robots, and they probably need 3 million. Okay, it's not like they have all the robots they need. Only like their first mile warehouses have mobile robots. Their mid mile, last mile have no mobile robots. Right? Okay, so there's like huge, even that size of an organization which has done so well needs another couple of million robots. Okay, so it's like massive. Okay, and none of the factories mostly have really ventured around this problem. I mean, a lot of people put in those old style AGVs, they're also fixed, so suddenly they are obsolete. So now, so this problem already existed, right? The people problem. And the third part is, I think a lot of times the products were just not capable enough, right, to solve some of these hard problems, and that I think is also now catching up. So now all these three things, and now the problems are hard, and I think now amongst the customer pool, if they, I mean, whoever does it first basically gets a huge leg up. I mean, Bezos, I think that's why he's announced this, and or is basically thinking of creating this $100 billion manufacturing fund, because I think, I mean, he has done it in Amazon and really like captured the whole market. manufacturing is downstream, is basically another, I would say, upstream for him, right? Basically, right? I mean, those are his suppliers. He can do the same thing. Like he's created these AI powered warehouses. He can create AI powered manufacturing facilities and really make sure that he has no competition in this space. And I think uh, that's really the potential with such a, you have such a huge lever available now. Okay, you just need the audacity to say what will you lift.
I mean, it'd be really interesting to see if he can, build a sort of a robotics and automation equivalent of what has become AWS today. So that, I mean, that would
I don't
be,
think that is the plan, by the way. He doesn't.
I know
He
it
doesn't
was on
want.
my
Yeah.
mind.
Even if you see Amazon Robotics, so AWS, they did an interesting thing. They took technologies that Amazon uses and made it available to the world. But Amazon Robotics is not available to anybody else. Okay. They in fact did the absolute opposite. They acquired Kiva and made sure that they could deny that technology to competition. So robotics, they treat very differently. They feel on AWS other people will catch up. So before they catch up, we might as well make money on it. Right. But robotics is very hard. I mean, see, there is no reason, right? I mean, they acquired Kiva like more than 10 years ago. But even today, with all the things that have happened, there's no one else with a million robots. Okay. So this is
Right.
hard stuff. Okay. And I think they realize it, and they will just hold the competitive edge they have for as long as they can.
Yeah, it's interesting that, I mean, you think that this time around the strategy is going to be more about building a deeper and deeper moat and not about.
I think so. I think so. If you can get any alpha against anyone else, you will. I mean, you would take it, and and manufacturing really fits. I can see that, right? He really loves low margin businesses, as he calls them. Okay, right? It's his famous line, right? Your margin is my opportunity.
Fair enough. Okay, so I want to bring it back to what this means to Ati, and you
Mhm.
already said that there's sort of a complete rethink about how you all need to build your robots going
Yeah,
forward. So in the context of these three factors coming together and everything else that's happening, like what Amazon Jeff Bezos is trying to do, for you, what does this mean going forward in terms of building Sherpas? And we've spoken earlier about some of the orchestration, the bigger picture sort of ideas you
correct.
have.
That's right. So I think that is just, so we are already doing it. You are very right, right? I think we had already caught on to the right problems, but I think that has just become more and more important in our minds. And we have just doubled down on that. So last time we spoke, I think now these systems are already deployed in very large factories, and we are getting amazing results of the value that we are able to deliver to our customers, because we are looking at the whole material orchestration as a problem and robots as a means of solving them. Okay, it's not as if the robots are just the ends of it now, right? I think we have really transformed into an organization where the robots are a means to the end, which is finally making sure that the factory runs in the way it's supposed to, and we get the right stuff at the right time at the right place. And that's not a trivial problem right now. So just so now we have a full system which we call as Ati Flow, where we are tracking many of these untracked items for the first time, right? Your work in progress inventory, your staging areas, your trolleys, your bins. Like in some of the customers we have gone to, they don't have a single repository of how many trolley types are there in that organization. Okay. Nobody knows, right? I mean, they have to count at that time. They don't know how many trolleys exist. Okay. They're not managed. They're treated almost as some its own thing, right? Like a consumable, because it's not something which goes into production. It's not all WIP also, right? But you need to manage all this if you want to manage your material orchestration properly. Okay. Your staging areas completely unmanaged, ad hoc. I mean, a lot of factories, and we realize this puzzle was there in my mind. I mean, factories are done after a lot of planning. Okay, and lot of money and time is spent in making the factory the best it can. And within a year or so, you will see a factory completely congested for all kinds of reasons. Okay. And people have all kinds of excuses for it. No, things have changed since plan, etc. Maybe the problem is that the factory is designed for fixed flows and not for variable flows. And suddenly, and why is that congestion come? Because typically some material is kept somewhere. where you did not plan for it. It's completely unmanaged. Okay. And so we want to convert those unmanaged things to managed. So I think what we are able to do is create a lot of these, I would say, not yet digitized data and become a system of record for those data. As I said, right? Like WIP, your staging, your material flows, your content. A lot of these things we are making them first class citizens, and we already have the map, right? So we are already the spatial system of record in these companies for the first time. Otherwise, before a product like ours, which has a physical map of the system, people have a logical view of the warehouse, right? Or a factory. They don't know physically where things are with in relation to each other. So now we have a physical relation of things and we have all these other things. So now we have a new data set which doesn't exist at all. Now what we are able to do with Ati Flow is combine these data sets with the MES, the manufacturing enterprise system, the ERP systems, and create something way more valuable than existed before, and which is bigger than the sum of its parts. We can track now in real time your production plan and say, is your production plan going as per plan, as what you wanted? Where's the bottleneck? What's the deviations? And add a AI agent on top, which helps you do these things because there's just too much data for a human being to handle. Okay. So you have a AI agent which is talking to all these different data sources. There are new data sources which have come, and it can track this against the production plan that comes as an input from the planning team who want to get stuff done. Right. This is really coalesced into a very, very high, I think, as a strategic asset for a factory than just about figuring out labor shortages now.
Okay. Give us one example, like a mini case study. If you're able to name the customer, great. Otherwise, you can give us a generic description because you said you deployed and they're getting value.
Well, absolutely. I can give you a couple of very quick examples. So for example, a very large tire maker we know. I mean, they've been over issuing raw material at every stage by 10% because they don't know which part is required when. Okay. So just, and that's a lot of raw material at that stage to do, right? It eventually comes back sometimes as wastages, etc. You have to scrounge the place. They have to some in one of the plants I've gone to. I heard something pretty shocking. I mean, they have to actually spend a day every quarter just to reconcile all the inventory on the shop floor. Costs $500,000. Okay, every quarter. Okay, that just disappears, by the way. So suddenly your ROI, I mean, people just keep thinking, oh, okay, what is my ROI versus a person? They're not thinking, as soon as you digitize something and unlock information, it has way more snowballing impact onto what you can do with it then. And create ROI, which is so forget the people. The people ROI is minuscule compared to now the ROI you get because you don't have to do this one day of shutdown. Okay. This is another customer where we reduced line starvation by 20%. Okay. Because I mean, stuff was just not coming, and they had a line starvation number which they were happy with, by the way. Right? They had set out a number and they said, yeah, this looks okay, and they were okay. But we reduced that whatever number they had, we reduced it by 20%, which is a significant thing in manufacturing. Because so right now there are also a lot of low hanging fruits available because nobody has tried to attack that problem. Right? There are a lot of these buffers after buffers built in. Another customer told us they were not able to do any aging of their work in progress inventory. So often it would happen like something is kept somewhere, the guy just forgets between shifts, right? And somebody has to keep it in their mind. I mean, who can keep all this stuff in their mind? And you will reorder stuff while something was lying around in the back of a trolley, and now nothing gets missed. He was telling us that the first time we are able to do FIFO in work in progress inventory because we have a managed work in progress inventory and staging area management. So we are able to do first in first out, right? So that's basically, you do first in first out so that you can have I mean, that's how you ensure least average time spent idle, right? For your, and that's easy to do when you do these fees. So every factory wants to do FIFO, but you're not able to do it in these kind of situations. I mean, I can keep going on and on, but like, just the few implementations I have done in the last 6-7 months, we have seen so many encouraging results.
I want to ask you about the overarching theme that we wanted to discuss for this, the sort of idea of a future factory, but maybe if you can stay on Ati flow a little bit more, few more minutes to talk about today. Where is it at? How do you describe it? And what is your sort of vision for where you think it can go?
So I actually think that this will own the full material orchestration now in the factory. We are managing robots, and the way I see it is right that we'll become an orchestration platform for managing these agents, where you have physical agents, which are robots, working with non-physical agents, which are your software agents, AI agents, working with your non-robotic agents, which are your humans, basically, right? And we can now orchestrate things across all three, because we created a great orchestration system, right? Now, not only do we manage just the robots, by the way, we can even manage the humans who are moving stuff. So there's another dimension that we have added, right? So we are able to put a beacon on a person and track them, okay, and make them. I mean, think of it like turning a person inside a factory, even a forklift driver, like an Uber driver. So the orchestration system will tell him, this is your next destination, right? This is the trip allocated to you, and here's your map, because he did not have a map beforehand, right? And he'll go however he thinks is the right way to do it. He knows where he has to go, but I can actually give him the map. I can make sure that an autonomous robot is coming, and I can coordinate a rendezvous with the human at the right time, right? No more waiting between the two, and this asynchronous stuff where stuff is lying there and somebody then gets to know. Typically things get triggered. Even if you do this old style automation, right? You keep some stuff, then a trigger will come, and then the person will say, okay, now I have to do something. But I can actually orchestrate these things, right? And that's where I think orchestration is really the right term, right? You orchestrate these things with a view, with the look ahead into the future as to what you are doing, and that is what makes it so powerful, right? And especially as you do it. So what we're seeing is actually now some of our customers are talking like we were typically implementing a lot of the robots and then implementing the software on top, and that's how we kind of thought of this. So some of our customers are saying, why don't I first implement the software and then the robots? Because why don't I just do this software across my 20 plants, right? Because that's much lower friction. Let me just at least see all the data to begin with. That also tells me where is the opportunity and best bang for the buck for me to put the robots. Today, the way somebody does, because everybody's doing this for the first time, and they're like, okay, I have these 20 plants or 100 plants. I will go after this first plant because I have a nice champion there. I trust this guy to onboard the new technology. It may not be the best place where he gets the bang for the buck, but it's very, I would say, non-analytical, non-quantified way of deciding where do you go first, where do you go second. But once you have data, you can take analytical decisions as to if I do it like this, and I think it also becomes easy to convince all stakeholders why you are doing something, because you have the data to prove these things. But today, just getting the data, I mean, we have seen, you go to a company and you are even trying to do like an ROI analysis, then this data is not at people's fingertips, okay? And we realize that, like, you go, I mean, we know everything about our robots, but then some of the process guys will come, okay, let us put our data in order first so that we can compare with what we do today to what will be with the robots. And I'm like, don't you know what you do today? Sort of, kind of, but we have to get the data. Okay, it takes days and weeks for them to get a quantified view of what they do. Okay, there's an intuitive view, obviously, but the quantified view takes time. So we can actually flip that script. We can put the orchestration layer. We can initially just make sure that we are tracking the manual processes itself, and even there create value with the orchestration. But the real fun obviously starts once the robots come in. But we can flip this script. It's very exciting.
Okay, so are you sort of looking at Ati Flow as a standalone orchestration platform, and then is it going to be agnostic in terms of which kind of robots your customers use? And as you said, there is legacy stuff like the older AGVs, and
Yeah.
soon we're going to have more and more humanoids. How do you look
Yeah.
at all of this?
So we were already even earlier, as you know, our fleet manager was already multi vendor, right? We could connect with any robot even there. We really believe in this fact that customers will have a diverse robotic environment. We don't think that we're creating some walled garden and you only have Ati robots and only then I don't think that's the right way to look at this. There are going to be lots of companies making great robots, and I wish everybody's robots very well. Okay, so we intend to make sure that the platform absolutely works with everybody and anybody. Right. So that's the thought process. So it's not, but I don't look at it as a standalone product, because, as I said, right, the value comes from this full stack that we have created. Right. I mean, even inside the robot, we are full stack. As you know, we make soups to nut, but even on top of it, the enterprise layer now that we have created, I think the full value gets unlocked when you really use the full stack. So I think that's really how we look at it. But we are flexible now, I would say, in the order of implementation, and we can deploy this product, and the robots can follow after some time and after a lag, and still derive value in the intermediate future.
Okay, so let's switch to your views on the future factories. You have argued that this will happen in three phases. I mean, I think it's been now decades since, probably, correct me if I'm wrong, the then CEO of General Motors spoke about lights out and dark factories. And I think they even went and acquired a big robotics company, and then they invested and spent a lot, but probably that, they were ahead of their time. That's another conversation. But today we probably are, we've never been closer to this concept becoming or beginning to become reality. Walk us through why you think three phases and what are these phases?
So so I think the three phases correspond to kind of what we actually just spoke, frankly, right? I think I really feel the way you will get to dark factory is first to have the data. I think some people look at it as a pure automation project, which is a mistake. I mean, see, you can. It's not like you can't implement it like that. And there are some examples of dark factories, like, I mean, this Xiaomi factory is there, and there are probably like some handful of factories around the world which you can count as dark factories for sure. But they become very custom individual projects. Okay. Which are very expensive, cannot be replicated. It's not a it's not an approach where even the customers who have done it, they are not able to replicate it across multiple of their plants, because it's not done in a productized sort of way, right? So you have to really think of it in a productized way of and templatized way of how dark factories get created. So I think the first sense will always be to digitize and get all these information, which is, obviously, you need your MES ERP systems, which a lot of people have. A lot of people's MES systems are still a little bit in the stone ages. Those have to really become better, and I think there are a lot of good software companies which are doing great work on the MES side of things also. So I think a lot of these things are happening in parallel. And then, as we have discovered, there is a whole lot of stuff in the middle without which these can't be done, which there are no products for, right? They are just complete, I would say, blank today. And we really need to collect the data around all of these. So I think this is really, really important. And then you figure out what's happening, and then you deploy. Basically, you have to robotize everything, right? So you will people are already understand how to do the lines, and then you have to orchestrate the material flow. Once you have done the lines and material flow, that's it, right? And the loading unloading, you shouldn't take that uh, for um, for granted also. So that's where probably the people on the line, which often do the loading unloading, or the on or who are at the work cell, that's where I think the humanoids will play a great role, right? So the work inside the work cell, I think humanoids have a great role, or around the work cell, right? And we have the strategy that where our humanoid is basically doing the movement from the line to the work cell. Okay. Right, or from the line side to the work cell, right? So that's what our humanoid is trying to do, but there are a lot of tasks to do on the thing. There probably be other tasks, and maybe other humanoids will do a better job of that, right? So different robots, but and then you have to move this material through the kind of mobile platforms we are making. There'll be pallets which are moving, trolleys which are moving, bins which are moving. All this needs to get orchestrated. After that, then you will, I think dark factory may also turn out to be like an ideal, which is not going to get realized for every company or every business, or you may get there in phases. I mean, people sometimes assume, right? Like, I mean, it's not like you switch off the lights, right? That's not how it works. So there may be a darker factory along the way, right? So you go from a well lit factory to maybe you're reducing the number of number of steps there and humans, but you may be able to create fully light out zones also in factories. So you may decide these are zones where we need people. There are zones where maybe there are people available as supervisors and you still are not fully lights out, but that's what I mean by a darker factory. And every business will need to answer this question. I don't think that answer is universal. By definition, large enterprises are complex beasts. The reason they are large is because they have solved some problems in a very unique way. Okay, and that's where large enterprises become, and they, no cookie cutter stuff works for them, right? I mean, we'll have to customize this approach. But I think the roadmap, the way I have described it, caters to the large enterprises and makes sure that they can take very data driven decisions to decide which zones go out first, right? How dark should their dark factory be? What's the ROI? And over time, the ROI equation will keep coming into their favor where they can get darker and darker, right? But the idea is to be able to give the right framework, tools, and technologies such that they can turn the knob. It can't be a switch. A large organization needs a knob that they can keep turning and regulating and getting to the right end state.
Mm. In the context of factories, especially where you are specializing, including the orchestration software, uh, how are you looking at what happens when more and more humanoids are thrown into the mix? You have one set of tasks that you are going to specialize in, and as you said, there'll be humanoids for many other tasks. And
Yep.
also, we know that, and you've spoken about how robots are now sort of coming out of the so-called yellow cages. They're no longer restricted to one safe area, and they're going to be all over the place. People are going to be there, and so on. So what does this mean?
Sure, sure. No. I mean, so this is something I've mentioned earlier also, right? I mean, typically all old style automation was in some yellow box. So you go to any factory, right? There will be a yellow line which will demarcate where your automation sits. Okay, and then you decide where to go. I mean, you go into that yellow box with permission. Sometimes there's actually a physical cage there. Okay, and whatever, right? This is the first time with mobile robots, and with mobile robots have already done it, and I think humanoids will do it, where your automation is mobile and it's moving around. And it's a very fundamental change. It's not happened, right? It's a new category, and sometimes a lot of I've seen automation experts who are very good at this old style. They sometimes underestimate because they have done very complex systems, right? But now you have a new kind of a thing, and and there is some unlearning to happen from what was working in the old system versus the new system, and that's quite challenging. And I think unless we are cognizant that this is a new thing which requires a bit of an unlearning and relearning, it's not going to happen. So that's kind of, I'm hoping that this yellow box metaphor is something that most automation professionals understand, and we have a way of understanding why this is fundamentally a new thing and why people need to plan for a bit more of change management at their end than they think. And answering your humanoid question also, I mean, the other thing I want to clearly mention is that, I mean, there will be all kinds of robots. Okay, so you will have humanoids of many different kinds, etc., because there are just so many different tasks to do. Will one thing do every task? I don't think so. And we don't see that today also. If you see any material handling equipment company's catalog, it has some 150 SKUs. Okay, there's a reason for it, because I mean, these tasks, because there's a huge advantage in being optimal in every task in a B2B environment, right? Unlike a consumer environment where flexibility is what is more important, you're not trying to be optimal at everything that you do. But in B2B environments, optimality is a very good goal, similar to in biology, right? You want to be optimal, only then you can occupy. So in biology, if you see, there's a concept of occupying an ecological niche. And you occupy that niche by being better at any other competitor at at occupying and taking advantage of that niche. So an example is like a hummingbird, right? So it is a very special type of an animal or a bird, right, which has this long beak and it can flutter and be stand still, right? So it occupies a certain niche which other things can't. Now, a hummingbird's design is very different, even within birds, from say a swan. Okay, you can't say that one kind of bird can even occupy all the niche. It can't, right? A hawk will be very different. So in birds itself, and similarly, a cockroach is so different. An elephant is so different. Now, similarly, in a factory, I mean, if you're carrying 5 ton of equipment, you will have a very different kind of a form factor. If you're connecting two cables, you probably need something pretty different. And I think the humanoid form factor is actually the best for those kind of tasks, right? Or, but if you are, I mean, I was finding a very funny video recently where somebody was showing that they could screw a nut using the finger in a humanoid. Okay, and it was shown as like, oh, so cool. But I'm like, I mean, haven't you heard of a nut runner? Okay. And with whatever speed you may be doing these kind of things, and I don't know how fast your joint will wear out and how many cycles. Is this rated for million, 10 million cycles, and that will not be enough to screw nuts. Okay. So I mean, just use a nut runner. Okay. I mean, sometimes, I mean, doing these fancy things, I mean, they can create viral TikTok videos, but manufacturing professionals really know better, to be honest. Okay. So they are going to use the right technology at the right place. It's not so you have to be able to use the right stuff. It's not going to, like, legs. I mean, there are places where legs are useful, but most of the factory, I think, wheeled stuff will just be faster, right? I mean, wheels are faster, right? I mean, we have legs because nature doesn't have wheels, by the way, right? I mean, wheels are engineered. Only human beings create wheels. And these are done because we can create engineered surfaces where we can outperform other forms of locomotion, which use legs. Now, once you have an outperforming mode of locomotion, the legs give you flexibility in some places. Footprint, etc., is an important use case, by the way, right? So don't get me wrong, but they're very few. Mostly, right? So that's why I said it's not going to be a one size fits all. You want optimality. B2B, especially manufacturing, is all about optimality, right? I mean, you're fighting for a few percentage points, or a few basis points rather, of margin to win in the market. And how do you do that without being optimal?
Yeah, I think in the whole romance of humanoids, people forget that underneath there is a sort of very complex combination of so many actuators and things that are hardware, things that wear out, and they have physics. There are limitations
Of
put on
course.
them by physics.
Yeah,
Fair
yeah, yeah.
enough.
You can't. It just won't be able to do everything. And and I think it's great to be inspired by humans. I mean, we created flight by being inspired by birds, right? But there's a famous saying that the airplane is not a bird. Okay. So, but we wouldn't have created airplanes if we didn't see birds. I think they were the source of. So I think it's great. I think that we are trying to take inspiration from humans. It's kind of a recursive thing to it, that we take inspiration from our own bodies and form factor. But when we engineer things, inspiration need not result in mimicry. That is not the most optimal engineering solution. Inspiration can just be inspiration. I mean, you have none of the engineered uh, aerial stuff has flapping wings, right? There we make all mostly fixed wing stuff, or blades which rotate, right? And that's how we do planes and helicopters, etc. We don't do flapping wings at all.
Okay, so just staying on the sort of topic of the future factory, which really kind of caught my imagination. And this is something that came out of another chat I was having. The future factory. Do you subscribe to the view that um, we'll have the so-called gigafactories, very automated, centralized installations, or in the context of the SKU proliferation and social media and whatnot, at the end user consumers' taste be sort of fickle now. Will you also see maybe even hyper local factories, because automation might make that possible one day, where we may be able to train robots on the go to do one task one time and something else the next time. I mean, maybe not in the very foreseeable future, but I think one day that will happen. So, do you think gigafactories or local factories or combination? How do you see this sort of supply chain emerge?
No, that's a very insightful question, Hari. I really think that all things will happen. I don't think there is going to be one or because uh, I mean there will be, I mean, and when we say even hyper person, I mean, finally, I I think some of these artisan handcrafted stuff which we lose because there are no artisans left, you could create artisanalish things with the right kind of automation, right? Because usually the impression is that automation will just do one thing and you can't have variation, etc. Doing that with automation is all fixed automation. But now that we are talking of automation, which is so flexible, you may get a flavor of bespokeness, even with machines. And there's a lot of premium to that bespokeness, which today now very rich people are only able to afford. Handcrafted stuff like a Rolls Royce, right? I mean, it's a handcrafted automobile. But you could create those kind of handcrafted automotive in a very very uh, in a very very automated fashion. So I think that will happen for certain categories of products, absolutely. So you can probably see luxury products being available to more people, right? And I think that's kind of a secular trend since ever. Like whatever was used by very few people, technology makes it accessible, and very few rich elite, technology makes it accessible for more and more people, right? I mean, like everybody can afford a smartphone today. The richest person and the not so richest person have a very similar phone today in the world. Okay, which is a great thing, right? I think about technology being a great leveler. It's not like somebody very rich can afford a phone, which I mean, yeah, I mean they can probably put a case which is more expensive than the phone, right? The primary phone not going to be very different from whatever they can afford to spend that. So I think that's going to happen. But I think the gigafactories are not going away because there are still, I mean, the world is pretty big, as and there are a lot of people, and products which are produced at scale will outperform products which are not. I think the costs and the economy of scale argument is not going to go away because of this. Okay, though what change you will see is that the gigafactories need not be in some remote place where where there's cheap labor. You will see more factories in the Western world where the consumption is more today, and I would say India, where consumption is rising, right? And you need and lot more, millions of people need more stuff. I think all these places, whether it's US, Europe, Africa, I really see a manufacturing explosion. This so I think like this one place like China being like the factory of the world, that's not needed at all, in my opinion. Okay, and that's not. I think the automation will democratize access to these kind of manufacturing facilities. Consumption will skyrocket. Which means there are many more gigafactories all over the world. Okay, and there will be niches of these bespoke products also, and so that will also happen. So I see this as being all of the above, but the big change will be in the physical location getting closer and closer to points of consumption.
Okay. Um, as you know, this manufacturing explosion, I think, is a good point to latch on to, if you will, as we begin to wrap up this conversation. You already said the combination of more and more sophisticated, more intelligent, more autonomous mobile robots plus the orchestration, framework. That's sort of that's how you see the future of Ati Motors. But as you tap this explosion of manufacturing, can you give us a sense of the Ati Motors of 2030 or maybe even beyond 2035?
I mean, I would say, I mean, 5 to 10 years. I mean, you would see by that time you are seeing dark factories already, right? I mean, I think then we are not going to see, and they will be dark factories created through systems and not as custom projects. So absolutely going to happen. I think we see a very central role for Ati to play in making those dark factories happen. Because as I said, right, I don't think it happens without a very very smart, intelligent orchestration layer making all of it happen. So we really think of us, when we think of AI powered factories, that AI powering the factory will really be Ati.
That's it for today. You can find the links to Saurabh's bio and Ati's website in the show notes, wherever you get your podcasts. To support my work, please subscribe to my posts at indiatechreport.in. I'm Hari Atli. Thank you for joining me.